Hello again, everybody, and welcome back. It is your favorite, most inconsistent uploading Destiny channel on YouTube. And today we're going to be looking at the new exotic sniper rifle that comes with the pre-order of Edge of Fate and answering the age-old question that comes around every time a new expansion is announced, and that is that pre-order exotic really worth the $100 edition? The answer is probably not, because that's a lot of money just for a gun, but of course, if you're playing the whole year of content, is it worth going ahead and dropping the full price on the Ultimate Edition to get your hands on this thing early? And we will be taking a look at that, as well as some damage numbers, and really kind of breaking down whether or not it's worth having at the moment. And yeah, before we begin, I will just mention that if you liked the video or found it helpful, like and subscribe are some of the best ways you can help support me. I'm hoping to be more consistent with Edge of Fate and some of the new content release schedule, but we will see how that goes. My Twitch is also linked down below for whenever I stream. So yeah, we will go ahead and get started. We got some numbers to break down today, like always, so we will see how we're doing. So the exotic in question here is actually going to be New Land Beyond, which is a very similar exotic to Destiny 1's No Land Beyond, and it is very unique as well within Destiny 2, because like No Land Beyond in Destiny 1 before, New Land Beyond is a bolt-action iron-sighted sniper rifle, the only one in the game. And that makes it quite interesting, really. But does that make it unique enough to really stand out? Because there are a lot of unique weapons in the game, like Cerberus was +1 is a unique weapon and no one uses it, so we'll take a look deeper and see. So when you look at the perks, the first perk is called the Master, and this is a perk where getting a precision hit grants a permanent increase stack to your precision damage, and those stacks are only lost on death. So on paper, this sounds crazy. You should be able to stack this up really high and get tons of DPS out of it. Well, there's some math that does, I think, limit this weapon a little bit, and we will talk about that in just a second. But the other two perks are, of course, Snapshot Sights, which is really more of a PvP perk, and I think this weapon will probably find a home in PvP, but I'm more of a PvE player and channel. And that other perk is called Bullseye Bolster, where landing a precision hit substantially increases the weapon's target acquisition, handling, reload speed, and stability for a short duration of time. This is actually a pretty solid bump to the weapon's overall just feel anytime you do land one of those precision hits, and it synergizes very well with the other main exotic trait, so I do like these two perks. Let's talk damage, because the damage is really what you're here for. It's a sniper rifle. We're looking for damage, total damage, damage per second, things like that. And at no stacks of the Master, we're going to hit for 52,501, and as soon as we get one stack, that's 60,722, which is a 15.66% increase, which on paper, that's really good, given that you can stack infinitely, but there is a catch, and that catch is that the damage calculations for this weapon are what we math nerds call a logarithmic function. Logarithmic functions have essentially diminishing returns as they go up. So they have a point that they can never reach, and that decreases by several factors. If you've ever heard the term asymptote in your math class, essentially that is a point that the graph will approach infinitesimally but will never actually reach. And this weapon does a similar thing. So we can see that just by going up to 2 stacks, which is now going to be 64,128. That is a 5.61% increase from the previous, not 15.66 like one stack. And then we go up to 3, it drops down again to 66,738, which dropping to a 4.07% increase. And then at 4, we go to 3.31% increase with our damage per shot at 4 stacks being 68,944. And at 5, it is 70,876, which is only a 2.8% increase from the 4 stack damage. Now, I will say, as you go up, you do gain a decent chunk, because that 5 stack damage, while the percent per stack may be falling off, is still a 35% overall increase from no stacks. So you are getting something over where you started. From there, we're going to jump up to around 20 stacks, because the fun thing here is the perk is called the Master, but the buff name transforms to the Grandmaster at 20. So I wanted to see what really happens when that transformation occurs. And at 20 stacks, our damage per shot is 89,251. That is a very big 70% overall increase from the base damage of 52,501 at 0 stacks, but our damage addition per stack is going to really fall off, because when we hit our 21st stack, we're doing 90,039 damage per second, which is only 0.88% increase from previous. So really, once you get up to about 20, you should be pretty much good to go. That's going to be where you're starting to approach that plateau of damage. And it's not bad. Like, that is very, very solid, but there's a lot of things to compete with in like raid DPS meta, and I don't think this weapon will break into, because we'll get into that in just a second. There are a couple other things that hold it back other than just this logarithmic graph. And the graph of the damage per stacks is here up to 20 if you're interested to see it. And from there, one more like quick example is we'll jump up to 25 stacks. 25 stacks, you've got 90,564 damage per shot, which again is a 72.5% increase from 0, but at 26, we're now down to a 0.041% increase. The damage is 90,601. We gained 37 damage points, which is really not a whole lot. It just isn't enough to really push this thing that much further once you hit that point. Because then we need to talk about DPS, because, I mean, that damage per shot value is respectable, and for a special weapon, it's pretty high. And DPS, would be easy to calculate on this weapon, because there's a rounds per minute of 72, and that's usually a pretty easy number to use for DPS calculations. I mean, we use it for Whisper, we use it for other 72 RPM snipers, but the problem here is New Land Beyond is a bolt action rifle, and that is not calculated into that rounds per minute value. So essentially, I fired all 8 shots and timed between the start and the end, and it took about 13.7 seconds to fire, including the bolt action animation for everything. That did not include the reload, because I was going to include the reload if the number was really competitive, but it wasn't. Unfortunately, it just didn't really feel like it did a whole lot, and the reload would knock it down even further, because the rounds per second came out to 0.583. Which is approximately 35.036 rounds per minute. So we can round that down to 35, about 35 rounds per minute, which is even slower than Icebreaker. And Icebreaker already fails in a lot of DPS setups because it is too slow. And the damage per second there, we used average values since, of course, the stacks increase overall. But the average damage per second for 20 to 28 stacks was about 52,847 damage per second, not including the reload. And that value is so low for no reload DPS that I didn't even think it was worth calculating it out, because it should drop well below where mini legendary snipers even rank. And that's fine, because I don't really think that's this weapon's purpose, because I used this weapon in 5 or 6 GMs today when it came out and I pre-ordered the new expansion. And let me tell you, in Grandmasters, it shined incredibly. Not so much the dungeons I did with it, that we don't want to talk about that, but the Grandmasters were phenomenal examples of this weapon's ability. Just because the Grandmasters that I did, I could use this weapon to essentially run Overwatch for my teammates while they moved in to catch a risky objective. I could use this weapon to pick off pesky snipers from a distance. It's very, very good against things like Shriekers. In the Sunless Cell, the room with all the Shriekers that spawn, it could one-tap all of the Shriekers very, very easily. And the other thing, over the course of a GM, if you are playing decently safe, and that's not even hard to do nowadays with the amount of survivability that's in the game, you can very, very, very easily rack up 50 plus stacks, which is pretty good. Now, some of the damage values as you approach those really, really high values, the damage will approach about a 75% increase, but you'll never actually reach that just because of the way a logarithmic graph works. But generally, as it hits the smaller and smaller bumps, you're going to be looking at a 74.9% increase. And I think that's pretty good. That's really good for something in PvE, especially with a permanent buff that only goes away when you die. I think it's really, really solid. Because the other thing this weapon did that makes it what I think to be a Grandmaster machine is that it does incredible damage to red bars. And I know that sounds like a waste for a sniper rifle, but you gotta think. A lot of times you'll have red bar enemies that are snipers or like boomer knights or even like a red bar ogre dropped on you. And the fact that this thing hits 6 digits on a lot of those enemy types is really, really impressive. Just because there's very few things that will survive one shot from this that are not a boss or a very, very large enemy, especially as soon as you go down to the minor enemy tier. And there's still a lot of threatening red bars out there in some Nightfalls, so it is something to think about. The other big thing that this weapon has as a strength compared to other snipers and GMs, especially with like anti-barrier sniper this season, is this thing carries a ton of ammo. And it was very good for champions for that reason. It was an extremely reliable source of champion damage. And in this case, champion breaking with anti-barrier sniper. And I was incredibly impressed. At base, with no reserve mods, you can carry 45 shots, which is really good. I mean, that is super solid, and you actually get a decent bit for every ammo brick you pick up, which I loved. I loved getting a ton of ammo back every time I hit something. So I cannot complain about the ammo part. The ammo part of this weapon's intrinsic trait is incredibly, incredibly useful. So yeah. Is New Land Beyond worth it? Well, like I said, I don't really know. If you are just a more casual Destiny player and you are on the fence maybe about pre-ordering Edge of Fate, I wouldn't really let this tip you over the edge. I mean, it's an exotic weapon in a video game. It is not worth $100 on its own. But if you're like me and you're going to play the entirety of the next year of Destiny, regardless of what happens, almost certainly, I've been playing through so much of this game that it is probably my most played game ever at the moment. Of course I pre-ordered, and I think it was worth it to me because I do a lot of Grandmaster Nightfalls. It's one of my favorite activities in the game, and this weapon slaps in Grandmaster Nightfalls. Let me tell you, it is one of the most useful, unique exotics I think I've used in a long time in a GM Nightfall. And so if you're somebody who's a bit more hardcore and is debating between maybe the Year of Prophecy pass or the Ultimate Edition, I would say getting this now might be worth it if you plan on grinding some GMs. It is a lot of fun. I enjoyed it very much, and there is a catalyst coming. Typically these pre-order exotics have a catalyst, so I'm assuming there will be a catalyst coming. And if the catalyst does anything crazy, we'll probably revisit it then. But yeah, like I said, I don't want to waste any more of your time. We are already up to about 13-ish minutes on the recording, which will probably be trimmed down in editing, of course. I did try a new recording style today. I used a different mic that I have that I wanted to try. And I wanted to try just kind of spitballing this without a super long script, try and make the video a little more casual. So if you liked it, found it helpful, whatever, like and subscribe are always greatly appreciated. I will not waste any more of y'all's time. Let's get back to grinding those new dungeons in Rite of the Nine, and I will see you guys next time. Later, everybody.